Terry's not available.
Terry's not available because she has to do a designating meeting. Forgot which town.
It's good to be busy.
Okay, we are go for lunch.
Good evening. I would like to call the January 13th, 2021 Henrietta Town Board meeting to order. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley.
Here.
Councilmember Stafford.
Here.
Councilmember Safranek. Councilmember Bolsner.
Here.
Supervisor Schultz.
Here. We'll begin this evening with a silent prayer followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I get a motion for the minutes?
Mr. Supervisor, I make a motion that we approve the minutes from December 30th, 2020.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley.
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford.
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek.
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner.
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Residents who are participating virtually and wish to speak during tonight's meeting will be asked to do so through the Zoom by one of two means. If you are using Zoom on your computer or with an app, select the raise hand control, or if you are called into Zoom, press *9. When it is your turn to speak, the meeting host will enable you to talk. If you are watching this meeting on YouTube or Facebook and wish to respond, please visit henrietta.org/wishyouwerehere for detailed instructions on how to connect via Zoom. For those deaf or hard of hearing, please use the Q&A feature in Zoom. For everyone else, please reserve the Q&A for the deaf and hard of hearing only. We have multiple public hearings tonight. First up, we have 70 Cape Cod Way for an endangering tree. Do we have a representative from 70 Cape Cod Way on?
Yes. Hello, my name's John Frudenwall. I'm here.
Great. So as I understand this tree, the arborist came out, took a look at it, felt it was endangering and potentially could fall on one of two properties. But if I am getting this, if I remember the appeal correctly, your issue isn't that you don't think it should come down, it's just that you can't afford to do so at this time. Is that correct?
No, not exactly. I don't feel the tree is dead. I've been there 49 years. The top of the tree had leaves this year. I did extensive looking around the tree and then the neighbor's yard. I don't see how it could even reach their house. It's very good shape, the tree at the base. There's no rot or anything. Yeah, I'm on unemployment and things like that, but I was just totally shocked that it would even be an issue because there's a huge amount of trees between their driveway and my house as it is. I mean, I'm just shocked. So
there's multiples in, so I may have gotten this confused with a different one, so I apologize.
Yeah, they marked the tree a few weeks ago. I mean, I had my family, a couple of my sons come over and looked fine. You know, it's been there forever, a locust tree. I'm, again, just flabbergasted it would even be an issue for anyone. I don't even know how they would see it. They can't see through the 25-foot hedgerow. My hands are up in the air, to be honest. I'm just a little shocked.
Is there anyone from the code familiar with a particular tree in this instance? Kevin, I don't know if you've got familiarity with this one.
Steve, I do not have that much. I know that Bill Cashin and Chuck Marshall were working on that. And again, it was arborist recommendation that it comes down.
Chuck, are you on? Do you have any additional information? Here, Chuck. I don't suppose you have any pictures of the tree this summer with canopy on it?
No, sir. I didn't know I needed to do that. I would have,
It certainly helped.
Right. I mean, I've asked at least 6, 7, 8 people. They've known me. I've been here 49 years, and neighbors, it looks straight, erect. There's no branches cracked or anything fallen or anything weird. It's just a tree sitting there. It's.
So this isn't the one that's been shedding a bunch of branches.
Say that again. You went mute on me. I didn't hear you.
All right. One of these endangering tree, we had pictures. The tree was shedding a ton of branches.
That happened probably 15, 20 years ago when we went to clean it up to make more room to plant more trees. So that's why I said I was gladly, my 2 sons grew up here. I 26 and 34-year-olds. They looked at it and they said, I don't see anything wrong with it. That's all they said. It was less than a minute, and they walked away. So it isn't just the cost or anything. It's that I'm just surprised they're even bothering with it, or that anyone's bothering with it. It seems fine. So I'm an old school guy. That's all I'll say. I'm just an old school regular guy.
Steve, there is a picture that shows a bunch of stuff on the ground. Doesn't necessarily look like, though, that it's been shed from that particular tree. It looks like they're...
Well, that's why I asked 3 or 4 people's opinion. 5, I'm no tree expert, but I didn't see anything that I didn't, because I see it every day when I go out of the house. And to be honest with you, if there was a problem, I have a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, and 9-year-old granddaughter that come here weekly, and they play under that tree. So there's a little seat sitting right out there now. They play and kickball and for months. So I've never seen an issue, and no family members ever said anything to me. I would do that out of respect to my family. So I'll stop talking, I guess.
So my thought is that we could have our someone from our grounds department in the DPW, along with Chuck Marshall, our commissioner of public works, and Bill Cash, code enforcement officer, go revisit the tree. If nothing else, if it's difficult to determine now because of it being winter, then we could revisit in the spring. If the tree buds, any dead or dangerous branches, would you be fine with removing if there are some?
100%, 100%, sir, 100%.
Okay, so then my suggestion is again, we go and revisit this, but otherwise we table the decision until the spring to see if it does in fact bud.
That sounds like a very logical answer. I like it.
Anyone agree, disagree?
Make a motion to table this.
Well, I don't know if we want to necessarily table the hearing. I think it's the determination that basically what would happen is
With the hearing open.
In the spring, we'd either reissue the notice and then he could appeal again. In other words, so let's say it buds, we determine it's no longer considered a dangerous tree, it's removed, it's done.
Right.
If in the spring it doesn't bud and we determine it's dangerous and he's not interested in taking it down, then he could reappeal. I don't see a reason to table this and keep it on going. So I guess I will make a motion. Go ahead.
And I'll agree with you. I don't know you, sir, but again, I've been here 50 years. And I'm a respectable citizen, here. If it's dead, I'll make arrangements to take it down at the end of the spring. But I don't feel it is, and I don't see any issue where I would let my grandkids play underneath it. Okay. I've never had anything fall from that tree, but I respect you guys, so.
Fair enough. Like I said, in the picture that I've seen, there's a ton of branches underneath. So maybe they came from another tree. Maybe they were trees that, branches that you had trimmed. I don't know, but.
Right.
So like I said, I'll make the motion that we close this hearing. We do not require it to be removed, but that we will revisit the tree in the spring. I would say May. By May, it should have some buds, right?
Into May.
May 15th.
Sure, May 15th.
May 15th.
So we will re-inspect on May 15th and
Determine from there. Okay.
if there's no issue, it's done. If it's dead, then we'll talk with you. And, you know, again, if we disagree, then you can.
100%.
Okay. Can I get a second?
I respect it. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
I'm sorry, I missed who seconded.
I did, Lisa.
Thank you. Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
All right. That closes the public hearing for 70 Cape Cod Way endangering tree.
Thank you. Have a good evening, sir.
You too. Next up, we have a proposed local law to amend the town code to require minimum buffering for historic properties. To be clear, there already is minimum buffering, but it's based off of the type of property, not on the fact that it's historic. So the proposed local law for any property that is a registered historic property, whether that's on the town, state, or federal registry, would enjoy additional protection for new construction with an expanded buffer out to 150 feet. This buffering was put in during our comprehensive land use plan update that was completed in February of 2019, or adopted in February of 2019. The columns are already there. The 150-foot column was for parks and schools, so we're just going to add historic properties to that column. Because of that, the seeker impact is minimal. Our town attorney filled out, and for our interpreters who might be new to town code, seeker is S-E-Q-R. So the seeker effect is minimal, but our town attorney filled out the EAF form for this particular action. We'll now open it up for public comment. Don't expect a whole lot, but just in case. I do know at a previous meeting when we were talking about this, there were a lot of people in favor of it, especially those in the historic site committee. A number of people who have historic homes were appreciative of the added protection. Any discussion from the town board?
None.
Nope, we've already.
Hearing none. Can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for the historical sites to be 150 feet.
Second.
Hearing no objections, that public hearing is closed. Finally, we have a public hearing for Riverton Parcel E, Park Grove Realty, special use permit application number 2020-023 to construct a proposed plus or minus 120 unit multifamily community and seeker review. I don't know why that's on there, but excuse me. I will note that we've already had 3 or 4 public hearings in the fall because there were some remaining questions with regards to the traffic impact, especially as it related to the county. We decided to close the public hearing at that time until everything was ready for resubmission. It was, so this is reopening the public hearing. And I see we have Jess Sudol representing the applicant. Jess?
Yes, excuse me. Good evening, Mr. Supervisor and members of the board. As mentioned, my name is Jess Sudol from Passero Associates. We're the engineers representing Park Grove Realty. We're the applicant for a special use permit request on approximately 25 acres known as Riverton Parcel E. As stated previous public hearings, we are proposing 120 multifamily units on the 25 acres, but really only proposing to develop on a relatively small portion of the overall site. As you may recall, those familiar with the plan, we've more or less divided it into an eastern section, which has 7 residential buildings and 70 units, and a western section, which has 5 residential buildings and 50 units. I do want to mention that we have made some significant progress. We've spent the last few months since we were last here doing quite an amount of analysis and traffic studies and working with the county, also the town's consultants. We really did a deep dive, and Mr. Supervisor was very helpful with providing information into the actual PUD or planned unit development, which is the zoning district that this property is in. For those of you that are intimately familiar with it, you'll know that the origins of this PUD actually go back into the 1970s. So they're really almost 50 years old. And there's a tremendous amount of information and work that was done back then in terms of everything from the layout to the land uses to the infrastructure and everything that goes along with that. So I guess I'll start quickly by going and just giving a synopsis of the analysis that we did do. Essentially, the PUD, when it came to its density, had 4 different uses that were identified when it came to the residential aspect. There was your standard apartments, which were, and there's pretty specific definitions to each one of these uses, but just generally speaking, the way that they approached the apartments was, really traditional apartment, which has a, common lobbies, central double loaded corridor, elevators, and really a traditional apartment building. The second use was garden style apartments, and that's primarily what we are proposing. We have our own individual entries. There's no common interior circulation. We have our own individual garages and driveways, and these apartments that we are proposing act and feel very much like what you might think of with a townhome. Now, there are even more detailed requirements that we've been working through, which include when you exit these apartments, is it has to be in a park-like setting and things of that nature, but I don't want to go into too much detail on that. The third land use was townhomes, which are connected dwelling units, but they're for sale and have a common property line separating the 2 units. And then lastly, single family homes. And these were all defined as the PUD was brought into effect. Over the years, over the past 40 plus years, the PUD, the overall Riverton PUD, and you can see it in the materials we've submitted, also the very large drawing that's here in front of me that's color coded. Wherever you see the colors, that's part of the PUD, and it's coded per those 4 different land uses that I mentioned. But it was initially contemplated as an average unit density of 4.3 units per acre for the whole thing. It's been developed at a far, far, far less density than that, primarily because there's been far more single family homes developed within the PUD than what was originally contemplated. As a matter of fact, the ceiling, if you will, for the percentage of single family homes was originally set at 35%. So 35% of the units within the PUD would be single family. Currently, as of today, that number is well over 50. So, based on economic forces and demands over the years, many of those areas that were originally contemplated as being either townhomes or garden style apartments or what have you, were developed into single family homes. So it's actually above that initial threshold, which I don't think anybody would necessarily complain about. The apartment style units are pretty close to what was allotted originally, and as are the townhomes, although it's a bit lower. The only real land use where there's a lot of a delta, if you will, a significant delta between the cap that was set in the PUD and the amount of units that exist today is really in that garden style apartment, which is again, the type of unit that we're proposing. So when you look at how it was originally set up, what those caps were and what exists today, really the only opportunity in staying within the, even close to within the intent of the original PUD is the type of units that we are proposing. So that's kind of a brief summary of how we got to the PUD. There was a lot more analysis that went into that, and having to count existing units and use the GIS and really dig into the definitions of each one of those uses, because they're a lot more complex than you would typically see. And again, one of the requirements of this board as part of this special use permit is to confirm essentially that the proposal fits within the requirements of that PUD. Yes, Mr. Supervisor.
I just want to interject a couple of things. One of the reasons the single family homes, I'll wait. One of the reasons the single family homes is over is actually because there was a large area that was supposed to be industrial. It's essentially where Mickens Benz is. That never went industrial and became homes instead. So that's why you see a lot more single family homes than originally intended. I'll also note that there were two sets of plans for this area, that's parcel E. One was part of the original multi-phase plan for Riverton, done in the 70s. At that point, Riverton was supposed to be 1,300 acres. Was to include an 18-hole golf course. Only essentially the back 9 were built, which of course became the front 9. It's just a 9-hole golf course. This area was just north of the back 9 and was populated by apartments and townhomes in the original plans. In the, Don, do you remember when the PB 207?
1995.
95. In 95, they shrunk the overall Riverton project to the boundaries that it's at today. The lands to the south, they rezoned out to R115, and those are all homes today. This area, that's where this designation of parcel E came from at that point. They basically designated each of the remaining undeveloped parcels. They made it very clear that those were undeveloped and not open space. In parcel E, they showed, again, garden apartments and townhomes. So this is very consistent in that regards. As Jess pointed out, really the basic difference between a townhome and a garden apartment, townhomes are for sale, they're broken up into individual parcels. The garden apartment, they're for rent, and it's all one parcel. So again, in looking through all this, this plan is very consistent with the original, both the original and the revised plans for Riverton. So I've done like I said, an extensive amount of research. It was difficult because a lot of the stuff is, it was in piles and drawers, and it took a long time to find an actual map of the original the original proposal and the revised proposal. So thanks to all those who helped play detective work, including Roland. He was able to find a lot of the maps and a lot of the documents that helped with that. So.
No, it's certainly a very interesting learning process, and appreciate everybody's help on that. Now we've kind of gone through the PUD. There's 3 main topics I want to talk about tonight and adjustments that have been made to the proposal. The first has to do with open space. The second is buffer, setbacks, and screening. And lastly, talk a little bit about traffic and pedestrian improvements. First, on the open space, as I believe I stated a little bit earlier, we are proposing over 80% of the 25 acres to be open space, which is far, far, far in excess of the 35% requirement. One of the main reasons why that's occurring, or why we're able to do that, is we have divided this proposal into 2 areas where we've clustered the density. Again, one on the west side and one on the east side. And then we've left approximately 1,300 feet of linear feet between the 2 that will remain undisturbed. And the applicant has agreed to basically designate that a no build or forever wild area, putting it into an easement to ensure that no future application could come in and ever try to propose any infrastructure or road or building in that area. We did look at it, and it would be feasible to connect the 2 with a road and then try to put some more lots along that, but just decided that that was not the highest and best use of the land. It's really significant because in that 1,300 feet, there's over a dozen single-family homes to our south that's where their backyard is. So now, we can tell all those homeowners, and it's really the vast majority of the homeowners that abut this property, that look, there's going to be no development in your backyard. That's going to remain forever wild, even though it is zoned PUD.
Do me a favor, don't use that term. It's not forever wild.
Sorry, not forever wild. I'll call it no bill.
Well, the only exception I want to see on that, though, is that if the school needs it.
Right. We would.
So
be
the
willing to
exception would be,
donate it.
right, for schools. And again, I'd like the town to be named at least one of the holders of the easement.
Yep. And the applicant's been agreeable to all that. So sorry for my nomenclature there being a bit off. So again, a significant amount of green space, even in the individual clusters themselves, they're not overly dense. Again, the overall density for Riverton Parcel E is approximately 4.7 acres, which is almost similar to the average density that was considered for the entire PUD of 4.3 acres when it was originally put forth.
I believe it was at one point, I saw 4.5. I don't know if that was in 95 or if it went from 4.5 to 4.3. Do you know which way it went down?
I forget which way. I just know the,
Right.
What was that, 4.1 now?
Right now it's at 4.1.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
just knew we were a little bit lower than
right.
the next one up.
So, and actually, if you include all the parkland that's separated out, it drops to below 3.
Right.
So
anyway, yeah, see, that's the overall PUD map right there, with Parcel E being in the, again, the lower right-hand corner, where you see a couple of those red swatches, which are existing apartment buildings and projects that we are adjacent to. Along those lines, one of the major adjustments that we've made since we last had a public hearing was we did provide some significant increases to our buffering and screening. Starting on the west side of the project, there's a transitional buffer that's required by code between residential, single-family residential uses and multifamily residential uses, which is a minimum of 100 feet. The planning board does have the authority to reduce that as long as screening and everything else is provided. We've actually done both, or even more than 2. For starters, those buildings are more than 130 feet, the backs of the buildings, from the southern property line. So we were well in excess of that requirement, but we didn't really stop there. There's not a lot of existing vegetation in that buffer, and we certainly recognize the potential impact we could have on a couple of those neighbors that are over there. Those neighbors do have deeper lots, but again, there's not a whole lot of existing vegetation. So we're proposing to provide a combination of fencing, significant amount of plantings and landscaping, and where there's not fencing, also a 4 to 6 foot high berm. And the only reason that we are proposing any fencing, and that's on the western side of the project over near the pond, is because we have a pond there, we're not as able to use the earth to build up the berm as easily as we can elsewhere. So we put that fence there to ensure that we are blocking that line of sight. But at the same time, we don't want the residents, either in our project or the current single family homes, to be staring at a fence. People have different feelings about that. So we are putting landscaping on both sides of the fence so that it really does create a solid buffer all the way through. So again, increased setbacks, landscaping, berming, fencing, really made a significant effort to enhance that buffer and setback to the extent that we were able to. And again, that is largely in response to a lot of the concerns that we heard from neighbors at several of these public hearings. And again, there is a couple properties that do directly abut this. Then when you move to the east side of the project, kind of appreciate who's ever running the computer and following along here. This is where we're not adjacent here to the existing single family homes in the subdivision. There is a single family lot that's out on East River Road that still has that buffer requirement. So we did cluster these buildings together even a little bit more to increase the buffering on the perimeter of our project. In this case, there is some existing vegetation along our property and in our property that does, in our opinion, is worth saving. Obviously, existing vegetation, if it's in good health, is probably superior to new plantings and new trees for a number of reasons. So where we are able to keep it, we certainly are proposing to do that. There are a few gaps where there aren't existing trees and shrubs, and we are planning on filling those in with new plantings and new berms to create a continuous buffer all the way around. And on top of that, our buildings, again, as I mentioned earlier, were previously much closer to that property line, and they have been moved further to the west and into the property. So again, we've tried to do everything that we possibly can in being a responsible development. We've had a lot of enhancements to the project with these bufferings and with all the landscaping that goes along with it. But certainly we do think that that's warranted and appropriate in that case. So you see here, these are some recently submitted documents, our landscape or buffering and landscape plans that we are hoping the board will consider this evening. Lastly, on the traffic, since our last public hearing, we completed a detailed traffic study. That traffic study, in no case do we just expect the town board to take our word for it. That traffic study is submitted both to the engineers at Monroe County and also to the town's independent traffic consultant, both of who reviewed our study and more or less came to a similar conclusion. And what they said was, and I'm paraphrasing here, is that they recognize the volumes on East River Road and also on Scottsville West Henrietta Road and are monitoring them very closely. Up until this point in time, they have not witnessed, experienced, or had reported delays or accident instances that would warrant them to install a light at that location. However, they did say that with this development, with the single family development across the street, Howard Farms or Howard Acres or whatever the name is, Howlett. With all that going on, that they are monitoring it closely, and should that become a concern, should it reach excessive delays, or certainly if there became a safety issue, that they would install a traffic light there, and they would also consider installing a southbound right turn lane, which is big for the county to step up and actually say that. So we do think we're making good progress. Certainly with some of the other developments in this area, it has their attention, and they are monitoring it closely. And certainly if it is needed, either from a volume or from a safety point, is going to be installed. And that's going to be looked at very closely as these projects are developed and come to completion. In addition to that, so outside of that traffic light altogether, this project is part of the East River Road corridor, which I think most people on this board are familiar with. And as such, we will be paying into the East River Road corridor. Basically, it's an impact fee to mitigate the trips that are generated by our project. The way that that's calculated is, essentially anybody that travels from our project east on East River Road or from East River Road to our project in both the morning peak hour and the evening peak hours, for each one of those trips or each one of those cars, the developer is required to pay $800 into that fund. And then that fund can then be used by the town in conjunction with the county to implement improvements along the East River Road corridor, which were identified as part of that study that's been occurring over the years. And I don't want to go into too much more detail on that. Certainly the town knows the specifics of that much better than we do, but I can, confidently state that we will be paying into that fund. And it's a pretty significant dollar amount. It's not a couple grand, it's a lot of money that will go towards some future improvement on East River Road. In addition to that, the applicant has agreed to install a new sidewalk on the westernmost portion of the project where the 5 residential buildings are along Moore Road. Currently, it's kind of a sidewalk to nowhere from the subdivision, and then there's a pedestrian path. Not quite a full-blown concrete sidewalk, but there is a pedestrian way on Scottsville West Henrietta Road. So we would be providing a connection for the two to really close the loop, for the lack of a better word. And I certainly think that's a local improvement, especially with some commercial uses over there. Residents to the south and that single family home choosing to walk or use the Riverton Community Association facilities, will now have that option, not have to be out on Moore Road in the pavement. And then lastly, we will additionally, and lastly, in terms of traffic and pedestrians, be providing shoulder enhancements back on the east side of the project along East River Road and Scottsville West Henrietta Road to approve the, basically provide a way for pedestrians who are walking that area as well. Probably not as many, but certainly it's a little bit of a dangerous situation now. So we will be improving that. So again, it really comes down to the, the traffic impact fee that we'll be paying, the proposed sidewalk along Moore Road, and the shoulder improvements over here on the east side, all as mitigating factors for the traffic that we are proposing. And in addition to that, the county may, as previously mentioned, decide to install that turn lane and traffic light in the future as the projects that are in process in this area are developed. So that's, I think we've done everything we can from a traffic standpoint, and I'm glad the county's not just blowing us off. Sometimes they say you don't need a light, get out of here, but they are absolutely engaged in this corridor for a number of reasons. They're involved in the corridor study as well. So with that, those are the accomplishments and studies and analysis, and as a result, changes that we've made to the plan in an attempt to make it not just compliant with all applicable requirements, buffers, the PUD and the zoning and everything else, but also just to try to really make it the best plan that we can possibly provide here.
So Jess, I'd just like to follow up on our email conversation today. If there's, again, this isn't necessarily have to do with this approval here. It has more to do when you go to site to the planning board. If there's any way, like a letter of support from the town to swap building 7 with the rec center, unless they're not interested in doing it, but I just think that would help tremendously. I understand that there's banking issues with that. If there's any way that the town can help with that, if the developer is interested in making that switch, I think it would be beneficial. And I'd be willing to offer whatever support I can to help make that happen. Again, I don't understand banks, so I don't know whether it's possible, but I just want to make that offer to the developer, because as I said, if we could put the clubhouse where building 7 is, that would allow you to slide building 6 a bit further to the west, which would open up more space between that and East River Road, which I think would be beneficial. And again, where the clubhouse currently sits on the west side, there certainly appears to me to be plenty of room to put a full building there. So
we're happy to continue to have those conversations. As you've alluded, this is the first step in the approval process. We have an entire site plan review with a whole nother set of guidelines and regulations and approvals ahead of us, should we get through.
And I don't know whether the planning board will feel the same way I do. I just, like I said, when I look at that, the other thing it does is, again, it removes the issue of those 2 apartments from the back of building 6 looking at building 7. Or, I'm sorry, it's the other way around, building 7 looking at building 6. So that would also resolve that issue. And then there'd be no complications with regards to, there would still be 2 left that have a partially blocked view. But again, in my analysis of the number, you can actually have up to 3 with a partially blocked view before you run into issues of the maximum. So, but like I said, that really gets into planning board decisions, not town board decisions. But just willing to offer. Don't know what weight I would have with the bank, but any other questions, comments from the board before we open it up for the full public hearing?
Jess, it says 120 units. Can you give, is there a breakdown of 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, how they're?
I don't have the math in front of me, but it's approximately 30% ones, about 50% twos, and 30%, actually more, it's like 30% ones, 60% twos, and 10% threes. There's very few threes. There's 1 3 in each building.
Okay. And then also on the environmental assessment form, I see that there's 120 units, but you're only there. It says 120 parking spots. Can you explain that?
No, I mean, there might be a modification that we have to make to the EAF there, but there is, for starters, every single one of these has at a minimum 1 garage space and then 1 driveway space. So that's 2 per unit. Plus there's some additional overflow parking kind of sprinkled here and there. So just like a single family house, each one's got a driveway space and a garage space at a minimum.
So those,
additional parking spaces, I think, are the overflow? Or no?
So they're over and above the garage, the driveway, you're saying?
Yeah, but it's not 120.
no, that's what, okay.
It would only be a handful because we don't need 120 additional spaces.
No. Yeah, I saw, they're on the map, and the largest number of them are over by the clubhouse, but.
I'm just reading what's on your report. And
Yeah, I'm sorry, it might be a
I just,
clerical error there, but the code requires 2.5 spaces per unit. So there would have to be, either we'd have to provide more in the driveways with a deeper driveway, or the overflow parking. But in any event, as part of the site plan review, if we didn't provide that parking, it would require us to request a variance, which we don't intend on doing.
and that's where I was thinking, if it also says it's a poorly drained site. And if you had to add more parking spots, that would affect the drainage.
Yeah, the poorly drained site is based on the hydraulic classification of soils, whether they're A, B, C, or D. And it's counterintuitive, but projects actually have, believe it or not, less impact when they're built on D soils, because those poorly drained soils are poorly drained to start, so they don't absorb much water.
Okay.
Alternatively, where you see projects have a very significant impact is when they're built on Class A soils like sand. If you had a 20-acre site on sand, all the rain is just immediately absorbed by that site. And then when you put a project on there, all of a sudden you have a lot more water you have to deal with. Whereas on D soils, most of this water is running off into the creeks anyway. With that said, we're still proposing ponds. We're still designing them in accordance with all the DEC and town requirements, which we'll go through that detailed review with the town's consultant when the time comes.
And the wettest areas are in the portion that are going to stay open space, correct?
Yep, there are, yes. And the wettest area is technically the creek that we're
right. Well, there's a creek, and then there's wetlands near it, and then there's, I'll call it soggy portions.
I didn't mention it earlier, but we are avoiding any impact to the creek or any impact to the wetlands, really designed around that.
Do you have any idea of what the rents are going to run? I know we asked you that the last time, but I would imagine that the developer would have an idea of where he wants to be with those.
Yeah, it's probably around, $1.25 a foot. So, I don't know exactly. They're going to be market rate rents. And so by that, they're not going to be subsidized. So,
so
one bedroom might be, I'm scared to say because that one we have not talked about, but 1,100 range, 2-bedroom.
What's square footage going to run on these? Do you have that?
The 1-bedrooms are going to be generally around, I would say 900 square feet, 900 to 1,000, 1,100 to 1,200 for the 2s, and maybe 1,350 to 1,400 on the 3s.
Thank you.
I will just note, this is not a normal multifamily special use permit. Special multifamily is allowed within the planned unit development without requirement for a special use permit. The reason the special use permit is here is because their plans don't exactly match. Essentially, they've relayed out the buildings within this parcel. And interestingly enough, they are all farther away from those single family homes than what was in either Plan 1 or, basically in the 1970s plan or in the 1990s plan.
Yeah, I think without question, if we skipped the town board and just built multifamily units as was designed by the original PUD, it would be far, far worse off for residents in the area.
Yeah, they were right up against that.
They were right up against the property lines. There was hardly any green space that was kept. This is, in my opinion, much better plan for everybody. And I think it would be hard to disagree with that.
Anything from the audience? Anything online? Oh, surprised.
with,
Oops, I'm sorry. I thought I hit unmute, but I did not. And I was talking to myself. I do have a few folks here. I wanted to start with Rich Rowe, just in case he had his hand raised right at the very beginning. He's since lowered it, but I'm just going to check in with him and make sure he is all set.
Hey, Jess.
I'm still here. My question, actually, I raised my hand during the previous public hearing. So if we could go back to that when this one's done, I'd appreciate it. On this one, I just got one comment. This is this is the anal engineer in me. The road that's going north-south on the west side of the property line here says Scottsville West Henrietta Road. That's actually Moore Road. You should correct that going forward.
No, that's, I had a nice little discussion with our engineer as I was leaving the office about an hour and a half ago about that, but you were correct.
Okay. But, you know, I actually did raise my hand during the previous public hearing. Maybe it didn't get caught, but I did. So if we could go back to that when this one's done, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. Any next online?
Sorry, I'm having an issue here, but my next person online is Lori Everdike.
Hello, can you hear me?
You can.
My house is 18 Mickens Bend, so we are literally backed up to the exit of the apartments on West Henrietta Scottsville Road. I want to understand, what are you trying to do, if anything, to buffer the back end of the apartments to our houses? And I've asked this before, but if at all possible, can that exit be moved further down where there's more land across the street? The traffic that we listen to going out behind our house, that's just going to increase. And two other comments, and then I'll turn it over. The money that'll be mentioned that could be added for other things. East River Road is going to be very busy. That crosswalk over to 7-Eleven, kids cross that all the time. There's no walk light, and this will just add the traffic. And additionally, the traffic review that was done, we're in a time of COVID. People are working remote. There's not as much traffic as there will be post-COVID.
They understand that. They were using numbers from before COVID. As far as the crosswalk, we have noted that to the county and state. That is totally up to the county and state, but I will note that East River Road corridor study did identify that intersection as one of the intersections that would be improved, partially using the funds from the mitigation fees. So just understand, basically, the county, the way that whole study worked, they looked at all the improvements that need to be done based on the growth along the corridor, both the existing growth and some of the future growth. It was targeted 5 years out, which I think at this point is maybe 2.5 years out. And they then assigned a portion of that to the new developments. They figured out how much traffic they were going to add, divided one number by the other, and that's where that 800 came from. So, you know, but again, the improvements themselves are being dictated by the county and the state. For most of it, it's just the county, but where it crosses Erie Station Road, which is a state road, and where it intersects with Jefferson, which is also a state road, the state has jurisdiction there. So, but we did note there has been talk about, and plans drawn up, I haven't seen, or I shouldn't say plans drawn up, they were talking about planning on how to improve the crosswalk for that intersection. So that is on the way. In terms of your other question, I'm not sure, I mean, you're across the street. I'm not sure how, if the issue is the traffic on Scottsville West Henrietta Road, I'm not sure how them adding buffering can help that.
Well, it would be nice, two things. One, buffering in terms of view, but then the other is, can that exit be moved further down more towards River Road? Doesn't have to be River Road. I understand because of the wetlands, you can't. But further down that way, there's a bigger distance between the houses on Mickens Bend and those apartments. Their backyards are deeper.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, if I can just add, one of the reasons why the access where it is there has to be a certain amount of distance between the intersection of East River Road and Scottsville West Henrietta Road, so that cars can safely turn and then be able to turn into the project without making a quick movement. That you know, once you get intersections too close, it becomes a safety concern. So it doesn't necessarily help the residents' concern, but that's why we have to put it where it is. And I do want to point out, especially as it relates to those homes along Mickens, when you see a lot of these apartment projects across Monroe County, a lot of times they're very much inward facing, and I see it all the time everywhere, by my house, everywhere. And you have these really wide or long apartment buildings that have their back elevation facing the main road and facing people that live on the other side of the main road. So that basically they end up staring at this wall of vinyl siding, if you will. And we've tried to design our projects to avoid that situation, which is why when you look at the apartments that are being built across from the area that's in question right now, we flipped it around. So the most aesthetic part of the building faces the, and also the backyards aren't towards there. So when you have people outside grilling or sitting on a patio picnic chair, whatever, you know, kids playing, even though there's not going to be many kids here, excuse me, that's all not going to occur towards these properties on Mickens. That's going to all occur internal to the project. So that was intentional, you know, again, and we can also look at, there's not a ton of space for buffering there, but we can certainly look at including more street trees and berming and things of that nature.
Sure. So yeah, going back to Jess's point, I don't think the county would allow that road to get much closer to the intersection. It just becomes too dangerous. Did you have any follow-up, or are you all set?
No, there's nothing more I could propose. Thank you for your consideration. It's unfortunate.
We'll have those notes for the planning board when they're reviewing the site plan.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I can't see the room. Are you still on virtual, folks? I guess that's a yes. I am going to let Bridget and Michael Andre speak. Whoops, where did they? Oh, hold on. They're coming. Oh, they are muted.
Can you hear us now?
We can.
Okay, beautiful. So we are Bridget and Michael Andre. We've recently moved to West Henrietta in November, and this is our first opportunity to provide our feedback regarding the proposed developments. We are excited to share with you our thoughts today. We do have a number of concerns as we share a border with Parcel E to the south of the proposed east site development. We purchased the property for the quiet and private atmosphere, and the proposed plans will introduce light pollution, noise pollution, etc., causing significant adverse impact on our home to see buildings instead of trees. We were pleased to see the new plans tonight, including a berm on the east side. Would it be possible to connect the berm similar to the neighbors at the west site? And additionally, would it be possible to increase the distance from our property line to the buildings?
Would you like me to answer that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so in terms of the berm, we can certainly do that if it is possible. The one thing I would warn is, as much as berms are great, you got to be a little bit careful about building them, especially when you build them high. They start to eat up a lot of ground and they start to eat up a lot of existing vegetation, which is why I'm not sure the woman who's speaking now exactly which lot is hers. But we've attempted to, and we'll continue to work with the planning board during site plan review to find that balance of existing vegetation, berms, and new vegetations. And if there's an area where extending the berm makes sense, then of course we would do that. You know, we have, you know, topsoil that we have to provide a home for. So, you know, it's not difficult for us to add additional berms where they are, you know, beneficial for residents and others.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. And just to respond to where we live, we're on East River Road, not the one that fully backs up to the property, but a portion of our backyard. We're at
the next one south. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So additional questions we had. We did have a brief chance to review the documentation regarding the bald eagle prior to the meeting that came out earlier today. Would you be able to provide information regarding the firm that conducted the evaluation? I see their name was Environmental Resources, LLC.
I can speak to them, but
go ahead.
Yeah, Environmental Resources is a firm that focuses in biology and habitat. They've been in business in the Rochester area since I started over 20 years ago. They're located in Spencerport, New York, and they work primarily in the Monroe County area. They have a intimate knowledge of probably more land in Monroe County than any other individual I could possibly think of. So they're a well-reputable firm and very familiar with the area.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the background there. We have been in contact with a few different organizations, the Endangered Species Unit at the DEC, and additionally the National Audubon Society. And they kind of had provided us with different information regarding the eagle. So we were curious on how that came to be. So it is good to know that they have experience with eagles specifically. Have any permits been obtained from the DEC or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife to build near a bald eagle nest?
Not yet. We did not observe a bald eagle's nest on site. The consultant that we're working with, we've actually worked together on sites that have had bald eagle's nests, and we've worked through that process. So if there was one on site or adjacent to the site, then that's something that would require permits, and we would go through at that time. But based on his and their company's review of the site, they did not find any habitat to indicate that there was any bald eagles on site.
Are you aware of a location of a nest? Can you provide that to us?
I will certainly go out and hunt. Since I know now it hasn't been discovered yet, we will certainly take a look and cross our fingers.
Yeah, we do know that there's some in the area, but to our knowledge, there was no nest in parcel E. But go ahead, Craig, go ahead.
I don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. This is Craig Eckert, Deputy Supervisor. On behalf of the board, I believe it was brought up before that the memo that was provided in that EAF wasn't sure if that was enough information or due diligence as part of the town. So I did contact Julie. I sent that email over to you. I've already forgot her name, from the DEC. She sent me Lori Gallup at the New York State DEC sent a confirmation that there is a bald eagle's nest, but certainly well outside the reach to this property that the DEC would be concerned with, which is 1,200 feet, I believe is what the email stated. The nest is kind of protected as far as its location goes. They don't want everybody to know about it. There are people that continue to watch it as volunteers and post information on it, and they do have updates on that, but it is somewhere close to the Thruway and the Genesee River area. So they are aware of that nest, aware of that bald eagle, and it is again outside of their limits is what they would consider for disturbance to the eagle. Okay, so we've got some more due diligence information on that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah.
On the EAF form itself, it does have it endangered and threatened species, and it has a bald eagle listed.
We do have it marked, but again, when we checked with the DEC, this development would not create an adverse impact. And again, because they are preserving a 6.7, I think it was, acres of open space to be added to the existing 9 acres. There's going to be close to 16 acres of open space that will remain, and it will remain open as long as the school decide. In other words, the only reason it would cease to be open space is because the school decides to put an elementary school there.
Right. And Councilman Stafford, if I could just clarify why that occurs on the EAF, it is because for the last several years now, the state has tied their long EAF to a database that has wetlands and environmental areas and aquifers and all these different things, including endangered species. But they cast a really wide net or circle around known bald eagle's nest. So, you know, I think it might be at least a mile. So if they say, okay, we know there's a nest on the Genesee River, they then throw out a mile radius circle so that anything occurs in there that at least shows up on the form, which is an indicator that, hey, somewhere in the region is a nest. You're going to have to take this next extra step of hiring a subconsultant to go out on site and review the habitat to make sure there's not also one on your site. So that's why it shows up on the AEF when it gets pulled from their database.
Okay, thank you.
And that's why we went through that extra step. Thank you.
So I was looking at some of the DEC recommendations, and I'm not sure if there's a visual buffer or not, but I know you mentioned, I think 1,200 feet away at least, and there are recommendations for distance for builders no closer than 1/4 of a mile without a visual buffer during nesting season, which runs from January 1st through September 30th. Do you know if there's a visual buffer?
There is. Let's just say this will be revisited when another developer tries to develop his parcel, which is actually much closer to the nest location than is this one. Put it this way, most of Riverton is in between this development and the bald eagle's nest.
Okay.
The one that I'm aware of, that's why I was asking if you were aware of one. No one has seen one in Parsley. DEC is not aware of one within Parsley. The one that is in the Riverton area, like I said, is pretty much on the opposite side of Riverton.
Okay, we have seen an eagle, but we have not seen it land or a nest, but we will certainly keep you updated if that changes.
It is definitely within its hunting area. But like I said, it's not near its nesting area.
Okay. My next concern is regarding the federally protected wetlands on the adjacent property directly to the west of the stormwater retention pond on the east site. Based on the site plan and this may have changed in the most recent one, I didn't specifically look at this option there. The distance from the wetlands to the stormwater management area looks to be about 100 feet, and the distance from the wetlands to the housing units is about 180 feet. So my question is, have these federally protected wetlands been taken into account into the proposed development plan?
Yes, they have. At the very beginning of the project, we did hire a wetland specialist to go out, identify the wetlands. They then delineate them. And then we design our project in accordance with the requirements that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has for federally protected wetlands. And I will also add that the creek that goes through there does separate our site, I believe, from that wetland on the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, absolutely. Before we even put pen to paper or mouse to screen these days, we perform that wetland delineation to know what we're dealing with.
And my deputy town supervisor, who also is on the planning board, is very well aware of a lot of the wetland stuff, the creek. So he'll keep an eye out on that from both the plan and during construction. He monitors that during construction. And I know for a fact that if somebody does violate it, he calls them in and the DEC comes in and shuts them down, because that happened on a project not far from Town Hall. So believe me, we take that very seriously.
Okay, great. I'll be wrapping up soon. One of the final questions is regarding the traffic. So I know that's already been mentioned to an extent, but in addition to the additional cars, my concern is that additional cars will also lead to an increase in road salt and oil dripping from them, especially with the slope of Scottsville West Henrietta Road directing it to the water sources like the creek or those federally protected wetlands. Is there a plan to mitigate this?
I've personally never had a concern with new traffic being generated leading to an increase in road salt. I would think the town is salting the roads on the same schedule, whether we're there or not. So,
Right. I will answer that question in terms of the way those stormwater ponds are created. There's a 4-bay, there's a whole system to percolate out those any salts and other contaminants coming from the road so that they do not enter the streams in the groundwater. So yes, that is part of the design. And you know, again, it's stormwater pollution prevention program. So get all the these right. What's it plan? So again, typically referred to as a SWIP. We monitor that very extensively to make sure that it is being done properly. You know, one of the things we will require them to do in the early phases of construction is to put in a construction retention pond. So to catch any and essentially have it stabilized prior to them moving forward so that it can catch contaminants also, you know, and runoff from the construction itself. So as to keep, you know, mud flowing, keep mud from flowing into the creeks and things like that. So there's a lot of work that gets done in that regards. You know, one of the things our town does is we do sensibly salt. So you won't see, you know, the bright white pavement like you do in some places where they oversalt. But to Jess's point, the amount of traffic won't affect that. Basically, they create a brine that's on the surface, and that typically stays there unless there's a gully washer type rain event. Then they have to put, you know, additional down. But like I said, they do a good job in terms of salting sensibly so as to minimize the amount of salt that makes it into our water streams.
Sure, absolutely. My concern was more for the dripping off of the increasing cars versus salting the road more, but I think you still addressed that.
Right.
On East River Road and also possibly on Scottsville West Henrietta Road, would it be possible to decrease the speed limit?
That's up to the county. We can. So, did you want to address that? Scott, yeah, no, I know. I'm sorry. East River Road is the county. Yeah, Scottsville West Henrietta Road is a town road. We could take a look at that. What is it? Is it 35 today?
I think it is.
Hi, I'm sorry.
40 out in
Deputy Town Supervisor again. East River Road is a county road and the speed is set by their determination. Scottsville West Henrietta Road is a town road and I'm under the impression it's 35 miles an hour.
Okay.
Do you know what speed it is?
We're mostly concerned about East River, but I was just asking in general with the increase in traffic there.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. East River, Monroe County DOT manages the speed for the county roads. We don't have any input on
If you want to send something requesting that to supervisor@henrietta.org, I'm happy to forward it on to the Monroe County DOT.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you. I will do that. And then lastly, we, as new residents of the town, since we moved here 2 months ago, we have been learning more about the history of the home, and we believe that it may qualify for the historical house designation, which, as you know, would require a buffer zone of 150 feet compared to the 100 for residential. Since we are so physically close to this development and would feel the impact to our home and property, would it be possible to postpone the decision from tonight to give us ample time to investigate this aspect, and if it will be possible?
Jess, would you be able to find out?
Well,
Unless
let me
there's
ask you something. Let me interject
Go ahead,
here.
John.
So this person's saying it may be eligible.
Right.
Okay, so that means it's not listed.
It's not designated, right?
We just moved here. We hadn't had the opportunity before this.
So it means it's not listed. We don't have a local law in place. You know, so even if it was eligible, then it needs to then go through the process to become listed.
Right.
Sure.
So, you know, an extra 30 days isn't, I don't think that's going to cut it. Just by way of example, we're sort of 2 steps away from that.
Right.
We don't have the local law in place yet, and they don't have it listed.
Let me, I just want to go look to see. I'm curious if it's even, if the building's even within 150.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Based on my Post-it note calculations of holding up the Post-it note on a scale to on that the plans on from a previous meeting, it is within 150. It is within 100 almost.
So in looking at the plans, it looks like from the building, the nearest point on the building to the nearest point on your house, it's 200 feet.
So what I had saw in the town code today was that it was from the property line to the building.
It is. Right now it's 100 feet, and that's what they're meeting today. But I'm just pointing out that from, you know, one of the reasons some of it's done that way is because, again, a lot of these times the property, the houses, especially in some of the older districts in town, are right up against the property lines and right up against the roads. But like I said, in terms of whether it's possible to hold up this project so that you may have time to go register your site, I don't know that we can legally do that.
Okay.
That's not fair to the developer.
Just have we checked with the historic site committee to make sure that this particular location isn't registered?
I do know that it's not registered. I have spoken with Tina before we had transferred the property to us, when we were still waiting for that process to happen. And I can tell you the house was built in 1914. It belongs to the Martin family. And we truly believe it would fall under the designation. There has been minimal work done to the property. Everything that's facing the road still looks very historical and original. It was a catalog home that you would order from a catalog. It was from the Aladdin Company. So for those reasons, we truly believe that it would fall under the designation for the historical home.
But again, it doesn't right now, and you don't have a law in place either.
Right.
So you're 2 steps away.
Right.
You're 2 steps removed.
If those 2 steps could coincide with the same 30 days.
Right, except this project is actually already was first applied, what, back in October, November? June.
So Supervisor, I had email communication with you in November 30th regarding this property. And like I said, we had just moved here and just found out about it. So this is the first opportunity that we have had to raise our concerns. And we were not, given your response to my email, We were not under the impression that this would be wrapped up the next time that it was spoken about when we could attend.
Understood. Anything else?
Bridget and Michael, are you all set?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Okay. Lori Everdike had her hand raised, but she's since sent a message via chat. Let me just check with her to see.
I'm good. I just mentioned it in the chat. So this regarding the speed limit, and it's not your area, but most people are not following it, especially early morning, weekends. And then the other was the creek with the wetlands leading into the pond is so overgrown with brush that it's filled with debris, and I mean litter. It's just as an FYI regarding the two topics that were brought up in the previous conversation.
One of the things, note for the planning board, we may want to look to see whether we should have a drainage easement on that creek if we don't already.
Thank you.
Again.
I know, Rob, you had started to say something. I don't know if it's
no, it's been answered.
You can remember.
It's been answered.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mike?
On the, I can't find the map here. Where would the land for this that's getting donated to the school, if they build, how close would that be to the adjacent current properties and your proposed?
So see that, the top one, see the skinniest part? That's it.
It'd be everything from here to here. They own this now, so they would probably, if they were building here, this would just allow them to satisfy a requirement that they have.
Right.
It's unlikely, this is all wet and really along the perimeters. It doesn't offer them much of a build opportunity. I mean, I don't want to speak for.
If they did it, right, knowing the way they lay their schools out, if they did anything back there, they would fill the land up some so that the kids could play there. Let, you know, open fields around. So basically when that land was originally donated for the school, the requirement was 9 acres. Since then, it has gone to 12 acres. The Rush Henrietta School District prefers 15 acres. They want to have green space around the school. So essentially, you know, again, I don't know that they'll ever build one there. But the thing is, right now they can't because there's not enough acreage. They own the land. They can't do anything with it. This gives them the opportunity to do such. And again, yeah, that school would be adjacent to homes, but let's face it, that's the scenario of pretty much every elementary school in town. That homes back up to those elementary schools. So I don't see that as a negative. I see that as a positive. A lot of people want to be within walking distance of the schools. There would be enough space, again, with the way they typically lay their buildings out, that if they needed screening, they could have screening or fencing or whatever. But
yeah, and we're so many steps ahead of our, I mean,
yeah,
we're just saying we're going to put an easement and we're not going to build there. And if the school ever wanted it at some point in the way future, we would consider donating it to them.
You might want to donate it sooner, and then you don't have to pay tax on it.
Right. But either way, it's not like the school's knocking on the door saying we have plans to build anything.
Well, it's advantage to have the school have because it also, the more land they own in that regards, it does help them from a financing standpoint. So, but also might be the same thing for this particular developer, that banks place value on land. So if he's got that leverage, he may not be able to donate it at this time, but we're always happy to have him pay tax. So I'm not asking him to donate. We just wanted the exclusion on the easement to allow for school.
Which we agreed to.
Which they agreed to. Any other online? Becky?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going with the no response means nothing. I'm sorry. We're not communicating very well today. I'll try to do better.
With the accidental mute, on the other ones where I just say anything online, but in this particular, in a public hearing, I like to get confirmation.
Well, it's always good to give one last chance to the folks who are attending virtually anyway.
Absolutely. Okay, hearing no further comments, can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
I had concerns about the traffic assessment.
Okay.
Particularly the area, Scottsville, East Henrietta, or the Scottsville East River Road. That particular area, the traffic is, you know, at certain times of the day, it's on the seeker, it's at a D or an F is what I'm looking at here.
I know it went to D. I don't think it went to F, because if it went to F, the county would commit to doing control.
Some more mitigation.
I've argued with them at length. They are insistent that it does not require control.
Them being the county, right?
Them being the county. The county is insistent that it does not require control. And so I don't know what else you do. We can't force them to put something in.
It's not outside the realm of reason that, you know, when this project is finished, hopefully, and Howlett is finished, that then maybe those additional few cars are enough for them to really finally pull the trigger. You know, but they're not doing anything today. I know that.
Right. When they look at the expected traffic from both of those, they do not expect it to be there, but they did say they will monitor it, and if it does get there, they will do something. The options they've talked about: three-way stop, a traffic light, or a roundabout. I don't know that there's land for a roundabout, but those were the three options they were looking at.
Is there anything that you as the developer can do to help mitigate that particular area? You know, I don't know, is the density of that particular, particularly on the east side, is there any way to reduce the density in that particular complex?
And I think even if we were to reduce the density and say, okay, we'll remove a building, I mean, you're only removing, you know, 3 trips during the peak hours, so 1 trip every 20 minutes. So that's not going to have, you know, the fact of the matter is there's, you know, a bit of an issue there, and the amount of trips that are projected to be generated in a worst case scenario from our project have the daily variation, for example, in traffic is greater than the amount of trips that we would generate. So whether we're 40, 120, or 200 units is going to have minimal impact in that situation.
Okay.
And there's nothing, and to answer your question more directly, no, there's no, you know, add a lane or add a stop. There's nothing that we can do that otherwise the county would ask us to do it.
Right.
We've essentially said the next step is a traffic light, and when the time is right, we'll put it in.
The thing they are considering is expanding the right turn lane. I did let the county know that if they're going to expand the southbound right turn lane, we want them, as part of our active streets, to make sure that they widen the shoulder enough so that there are still pedestrian and bicycle lane. But they're not even certain they're going to do that. That from what they see right now, that it doesn't call for that. You know, again, a lot of the residents around there feel differently, but we can't force them to change. It's the same thing like we couldn't get the state to lower the speed limit at West Henrietta Road and Martin Road. They just wouldn't do it. Mm-hmm. It's, you know, that doesn't mean that we can say then to anybody else coming in, sorry, until the county does this, you can't build anything there. Or you can't build to the allowable density. You know, like I said, with with that said, that they're not willing to do it at this time or commit to it, I will point out that when we brought up issues with an intersection here at Highland and Calkins, they did respond, they did make a change, and it's helped dramatically. When there was the addition of the sheriff office, we had people waiting for long periods northbound at that intersection. And they were resistant at first. We explained the situation to them and they came in and put together, it wasn't our exact suggestion. They looked at it differently and the solution they came up with has helped tremendously. And they are also looking to restripe it to help additionally with the sheriff's office. So they aren't unresponsive. They are much more responsive than the state, but ultimately, again, it is their decision. And right now, when they look at the numbers, they understand it's close, but right now it's under the threshold. And so if they see it going over the threshold, they will put in some control at that intersection.
Yeah, well, we are investing a significant amount of money as an off-site improvement on the shoulder improvements on that intersection, which is mitigation to a degree because it improves pedestrian safety.
Right. Yeah, so again, they're doing pedestrian safety effectively on three sides, right? The road along the sidewalk along Moore Road, and then the shoulder along the north and east side of the eastern portion. That road already has a decent reinforced shoulder. There's a couple areas where it could use some work, and that's what they're going to be doing. So it should help with both pedestrian and cycling safety.
Thank you.
Jess, you just said something I just want to make sure I heard it correctly. You said one building only reduces 3 trips during the peak hour. So are you saying that one building with 10 units only, well,
I think it's
only 3 cars will be going out
peak hour in the morning. I think it's a 0.4 trips per unit. In the afternoon, it's 0.6 trips per unit. About half of those exiting, half of those entering. So worst case scenario, just the math I was doing quick, was 0.6 times the 10 is 6 trips, 3 being leaving, headed to that intersection that we were talking about. So for example, single family is 1-to-1. So for one unit, you get 1 trip. Multifamily dwellings like these are 0.6, seniors 0.12. Those are all different factors that we use that are based on years and years and all kinds of data.
I'm not a traffic expert, but it just seems to me that a building with 10 units would generate more than three cars going out during peak hours. You know, in the morning, I can tell you that just on my street, I can see more cars go out, more than 3 go out, and a lot less, and there's not 10 houses on that street. So that number seems low to me. Thank you. Thanks.
I have one question, since you did mention, a lot of times when we're here talking about these projects, we all think about, oh, look at all the money that the builder's probably going to make on the project. But you just spoke to us about mitigation for pedestrian safety. Any idea what that costs when you do those kind of improvements to help our communities?
Yeah, actually happen to have it right here. But each one of those improvements, the shoulder improvement, we're talking about being between $50,000 and $60,000. The sidewalk on more roads, another $45,000 to $50,000. And then the impact fee that we're paying is $80,000 to $100,000. So it's well over $200,000 outside of typical construction costs that are going towards traffic and pedestrian improvements, frankly, that wouldn't normally be expected of a typical project.
Right. Okay, thanks. Appreciate that answer, and thanks for taking care of those things for us.
Lori Everdyke does have her hand raised again if you'd like to chat with her.
Sorry, regarding the sidewalk, there's a sidewalk that's partially down West Henrietta Scottsville Road. Can we look into completing it to the end, since we're doing the same for Moore Road? to the end to River Road. The sidewalk stops, I think it's just past the senior housing.
I'm not sure where you're talking about.
On Scottsville West Henry Road, there's senior apartments that have sidewalks in front of it. If we could continue it to River Road by the apartments, since we're doing the same with Moore Road.
So it would be an unfair burden to put that on them if it's not in front of their, okay, I see, I think
it would be in front of theirs. That's what I'm saying, in front of their area.
That's what they, again, it's not sidewalk, it's enhanced shoulder is what I'm seeing.
Right, not in front of the senior housing, it is sidewalk.
On the north or south side of the road?
It's south.
So are you saying it's east of the Miller's Pharmacy?
So from Moore Road to the creek, it is sidewalk. And after the creek, it is wide shoulder. And there's a lot more people walking that now, one, because of COVID, but two, because of the houses on the other side of River Road. If those apartments are there, I could see where they would have a use also.
That's what we're talking about, doing the shoulder improvement.
Yeah.
And the reason why it's a shoulder improvement and not a sidewalk is because the topography drops off so great there that most sidewalks traditionally have a tree lawn. So if you were to try to do a sidewalk, it wouldn't be possible.
But to answer your question, that is the plan, is that they are carrying that forward again. It's more likely to be a shoulder, just as Jess was saying, because we'd had our guys go take a look at that as to which made more sense to do it as an enhanced shoulder or as a sidewalk. And they felt it made more sense to do as an enhanced shoulder. I can actually take a look at it again, but I suspect that's how it will be. Well, again, we can take a look at that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anything else from the board?
Hold on. I have Bridget and Michael have their hand raised.
Hi, yes, concerning the historical home application for the property on East River Road there, the Historical Site Committee is meeting in less than a week on January 19th. We plan to get our application in and it can be reviewed at that meeting and we can get the designation then. So would it be possible to consider that?
I'll have to check on the legality of that.
Can I interject?
Sure.
The town board actually issues that designation after a public hearing.
Yeah, it's a lengthy process. It's not just one meeting. I mean, it's months and months of review, visits, research, public hearings.
Okay, sure. Months and months of review. I didn't realize that, but just as building the property is months and months and over a year of work, can you start on the west property and work with us here? Does that piece right bordering our property need to be done right away? Can we have some time to work on this designation?
Again,
the law is not even in place yet. So you could have it designated. There's no law right now.
Was it not just approved?
No. It was not approved.
No, we just had the public hearing.
What's the timeline for that being approved?
Potentially tonight, but or potentially tabled to next meeting, or potentially never.
Okay, instead of this back and forth, can you give us an extra few feet? We would be gaining an extra 50 feet if we were to do this. Can you give us a little more? than the 100 that's provided?
We just revised the plan to provide almost double from where it was.
What is it now, Jess?
I believe it's right, depending on where you're measuring to. But
From the property line, it's 100 feet, correct?
I think it's just under that, but
Is that from the?
just that one building corner is like 93 or something.
So one of the things I'll point out, that's not a town board decision, that's a planning board decision. Just so you're aware. So to answer your question, the town board cannot give you that. The planning board potentially could, but it's a planning board decision, not a town board decision.
Okay, is there a planning board meeting in the near future or no?
Do you know when that's scheduled, or has it been scheduled yet?
It has not been scheduled yet.
Has not been scheduled yet. Okay. Anything else?
I do not see anything.
Can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing no objections. The public hearing for Riverton Parcel E, Park Grove Realty Special Use Permit application number 2020-023 is closed. Thank you, Jess.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you.
That quote finishes all our public hearings. Can I get my first?
Did you want to go back? Poor Rich Rowe. I thought he was super excited to talk about Riverton, and he was not. He was here to talk about something else. Would you like to talk to him?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I bet you guys are excited to talk to me. Anyway, I just have a question regarding the timing of the proposal. Why now is the push to get the further setback from historical buildings?
Whether it's a push now, but basically, typically what happens is if the law is not in place when the application comes in or basically gets approved, in other words, if it's not in place, you can't apply that law, right? So as we're just looking at some of the stuff that's been going on in other locations, there was a feel that this was important to have in place. As I start to look at the ramifications, I'm not sure that I'm comfortable voting on it tonight because I want to look at some additional ramifications. We were largely looking at it in one specific location, although I will note that the planning board, even if it goes to 150 feet, the planning board does have the ability to go below that. It's a tool for the planning board, not the town board. So just because it can be up to 150 feet for a historic property, the planning board can cut it in half, essentially to 75. So as I think about that, maybe I don't have the issue. You know, the key is you're trying to create protections for the historic properties without creating an undue burden for other property owners. You know, the thing that a lot of people talk about is they don't want stuff in their backyard, but they forget their house is somebody else's backyard, right? So, you know, it's always a balance with this stuff in terms of protecting the rights of the property owners and protecting the rights of the neighbors, right? You don't have a right to not have a neighbor. If you don't want to have a neighbor, buy the land. I know that sounds callous, but really from a legal standpoint, that's it. That's the option you have.
Right. It just seemed coincidental that this is coming now when that property development, that Delphi was talked about at a board.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. The Delphi property is the one that triggered it as we were looking at that. And we were looking at the 100-foot buffer. So again, on a 30-acre lot, increasing the buffer from 100 to 150 doesn't impose an undue burden on them, right? But if it was a 1-acre lot, that 150-foot buffer could impose a significant burden on the property owners. Now, again, the planning board is a discretionary board. They have the ability to look at that and make that judgment call on a vote by the planning board that if it's going to be too much of a burden on the neighboring property, they can reduce it, right? Under the current way the law is written, they would be able to reduce it. The law is not changing. It's which table it ends up in. Under the current law, it's 100 feet to a residential property, which means they could reduce it to 50. The other thing I'll point out is I don't know that they are correct. I know industrial was 150 foot. I don't know that multifamily is. I'd have to go to that section of the town code.
That's all right. I recently reviewed it, Steve. I was just curious as to why the timing of the push. So you answered my question. So thank you. Thanks for letting me go back. I'm all set. Thank you.
Yep. I'm just going to check real quick because now I want to know. It's under planning board process, right? Do you remember, Don?
Yeah, let me see.
And that's under zoning?
Yes.
It was their review process, if I remember correctly. Planning board. Minimum transitional buffers. Let me see the table.
295.60.
Yeah. So let's see. Multiple dwelling. It's only 100 feet.
To what? To residential?
Between a multiple dwelling and a park or school. So it actually doesn't change. So remember, we're not changing it to 150 feet. We're putting it in the most restrictive category. And for industrial and commercial, it's 150 feet. But for multiple dwelling, it's only 100 feet. And for residential, it's only 50. A new house next to a park or school would only be 50 feet.
Right. So in this case, it would be 100.
It's 100 feet. So they're actually already there. So to answer the questions, if the folks who live on East River Road are still there, not to say not to go get your historic site designation, but just to make clear, it would only give you a 100-foot buffer around your property, not 150 feet. If they were trying to put in an industrial development, it would be 150 feet. Okay. That makes me, well, like I said, the thing you got to be careful of is I was a little worried as I was thinking more about the way the laws, the way we did the law. I feel better because again, it does. And when we were doing the GEIS, we took this stuff into account, right? We spent months and months and multiple meetings per month going over this stuff multiple times because these are the things you have to think out in advance as far as, again, protecting the people who are living there today without putting an undue burden on the property owner who's trying to develop their property. And so that's one of the things we looked at and we considered, you know, how much impact do those different new uses have to those adjacent existing uses. And that determines those distances. And again, the most protective we felt was the school and parks. And that's the category that we're talking about moving historic sites into. So it doesn't increase it to 150 everywhere. The reason we talked about the 150 is because specific to the Delphi property where it was an industrial use, it would go from 100 to 150. But again, adjacent to a multi-family use, it actually doesn't change it. In both cases, it's 100. So.
And is there a road in between their house and this project?
No.
Okay, it is adjacent.
It is adjacent.
Gotcha.
They share a common property line.
Gotcha.
Steve, Kevin Wilson, Director of Building and Fire Prevention. Yeah, just one quick note. The property directly to the north of the caller, that property is already designated historic. So their rear property line already butts to that.
Okay, so they're going to have that 100-foot setback on that, which again is, if you remember, we did move them to 100 feet. So whether it's a multifamily next to a historic house or 100 multifamily next to a house, that requirement is 100 feet. You know, now if because of topography and wetlands and stuff like that, they can only get to 97 feet, again, the planning board has the ability to say close enough. It can't go below 50, but they can approve anywhere between 50 and 100 with trying to stay as close to 100 as possible. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that.
Not a problem. That's what I'm here for.
Okay. So now are we all done with our public hearing comments, questions? Sounds like we are. Can I get my first resolution?
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution 1-121 or 2021 to authorize bill payable for January 13th, 2021.
Second.
We'll note that the large amount includes the medium duty plow vehicle that we're going to use for the circles and hammerheads. And it also includes a pickup truck for the, what was it, parks?
Yes, I believe it was parks.
Right. Or facilities and grounds or whatever their name is today.
Well, it should be very helpful.
Yep. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm hoping that the medium duty truck will perform well in the circles and hammerheads and freeing up the heavy duty truck for the main roads. Right. Yeah. I will note that when they did the plow run earlier this year, the additional people, the additional vehicles, they had one of the fastest plow runs that they've been able to do. And I'm not talking about speeding, I'm just talking about total time, because again, the additional vehicles and our road foreman and commissioner of public works laid out new plow routes to take advantage of the new vehicles. And again, it was very efficient, and it potentially has the ability to get even better as we get these new vehicles online. So very great. Any further comment? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley.
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford.
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek.
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner.
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz and fellow board members, I have resolution 1-2, 2021 to adopt the updated COVID-19 procedures for town hall.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley.
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford.
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek.
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner.
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor, fellow town board members, I have resolution 1-3, 2021 to authorize the issuance of temporary testing and vaccination facility permits. Seconded.
So I'll note that there's two that should be in town fairly quickly. I don't know that the first one needs it. it's the Dome Arena. Because we'd already done stuff in terms of approving that as a point of dispensing for vaccinations. But if you haven't seen, New York State is going to be setting up a point of dispensing facility at the Dome Arena for COVID vaccinations. It should have some significant amount of capacity, and they're working with a developer to ensure good traffic flow and minimal lines. They don't have all the specifics, or they haven't been confirmed, so I can't share them all, but I can tell you that they're looking at, like I said, decent capacity, and that you would essentially be given a 1 hour block so as to spread the traffic out. And then the second thing is there is a testing facility that is interested in going in Henrietta Plaza, which is the northeast corner of East Henrietta Road and Jefferson Road, and one of the shop fronts existing there. And again, those would be by appointment only. And I was over there today, and there are significant empty parking spaces in the area that they're talking about. So I don't see it being an issue with the existing commercial traffic in that area. Don't know if there's going to be others, but those are the two that are out there today. Any other questions, comments?
I think it's great that the Dome's going to open up for testing. I had a resident call me about it today. They're looking forward to getting vaccinated.
Anything online? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley?
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford?
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek?
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz and fellow board members, I have resolution number 1-4, 2021, to execute a fire prevention and code consulting service contract with GHD Consulting Services, Inc.
Second. So again, there was a request from Councilman Stafford. If there is a company in the Rochester area that does this, if we could add them as an authorized, assuming that, you know, I expect you to do research and find if they do a good job, that we would add them as a second potential consulting service. I know we've used these guys for a long time and have a really good track record with them, but it would also be nice to be able to support local companies. Any further comments? Anything online? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley?
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford?
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek?
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz?
Aye. I'll just interject for a moment that if, I know we're getting close to 9 o'clock, if that's when your time is done, you can take off. The main thing we were interested is in the public hearing, because again, we knew there were a lot of deaf and hard of hearing individuals who live in that neighborhood. So the rest of the stuff is general business. If you're willing to stay, we're happy to continue to have the interpreting, but if you have to go, that's okay too.
Yeah, I think the interpreters will probably stay. That's all right.
That is all right with us. I just wanted to make sure you knew that the main key thing has already happened. Okay, fellow board members, I have resolution 1-5, 2021 to authorize the supervisor to execute an addendum to the service agreement with Alliance Cleaning Service LLC for cleaning service at the Henrietta Public Library.
Second.
Any discussion? Anything online? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley?
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford?
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek?
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz?
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution 1-6, 2021 to appoint a delegate and alternate delegate for the Association of Towns annual business meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley?
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford?
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek?
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz?
Aye.
Fellow board members, I have resolution 1-7, 2021 to authorize the sale and surplus equipment from Parks and Recreation Department.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor, fellow town board members, I have resolution 1-8, 2021 to declare items surplus materials from the engineering and library departments. Seconded.
Any discussion? I know that Adrian was excited that some of her catalog shelving will get new life in the new Monroe County Sheriff's Office, so substation. Any other discussion? Anything online? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford, Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Well, when are we on?
Oh, is it me?
All right,
Sorry.
yep.
Yes.
I just want to make sure it wasn't me. I'm
I
next.
went too far. Supervisor Schultz, fellow board members, we have resolution 1-9, 2021 to make appropriate budget transfers per the 2020 adopted budget.
Second. Any discussions? Anything online? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Fellow board members, I have resolution 1-10, 2021 to make the attached personnel changes.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
I was gonna make a motion to amend that. So does somebody else want to present?
Which one? 111?
11.
Read it.
You want to read it?
Yeah, I'll read it.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Supervisor, fellow town board members, I have resolution 1-11, 2021 to adopt local law number 1 of 2021 to amend the Henrietta Town Code to require minimum buffering to historic properties.
Second.
Discussion?
I'd like to table this because we just had the hearing, public hearing.
Oh, you said you wanted to amend it.
I'm sorry, not amended, excuse me, to table it.
To make a motion to table.
Yeah, make a motion.
Right. The difference being that if we were going to table the next two, then you actually don't read any of them in the buffer and they can, or into the record, and they can reuse the numbers. So, okay, in the future. Is there a reason why you want to table it?
Because a lot of times in the past, we have tabled resolutions that when we've had the public hearing on big issues.
So was there anyone who disagreed with this? That's usually why. It depends what we're doing. If it's something's big like a rezone, that's one we decided to always do. But
we were okay.
Well,
I'm not saying not to. I'm just saying that. Right. I mean that's the stuff that we typically don't do the same night as the public hearing are rezones.
well, I think there were just some questions and concerns that came up during the course of the conversation.
There, and again, I had some of them until I went and reread that section of code that this is modifying.
Mm-hmm.
And in refreshing my memory on the code we put in place, my misgivings went away because again, if this was 150-foot buffer always, I do think that would place hardship on some adjacent properties. But because that's not the case, in fact, if it's a home that's going next to single family home. It's only next to a historic home. It's only 50 feet, which again could be cut in half by the planning board down to 25. Again, the buffering is a tool for the planning board, which is why in the section of code, why it's in 295-60, it's talking about their approval process for the site plan, that they have to apply these minimum buffers. So
Mr. Supervisor,
again, I'm not object to delaying it. I just don't personally feel a strong need to, but I can go either way. Don?
yeah, in the case of development tonight, it wasn't clear to me whether the 97 feet or whatever they said it was between the closest building or pavement to be constructed and the lot line to the historic,
That's
potentially
correct.
historic?
That 97 feet was from the lot line to the closest point on the building.
Okay, because this talks about pavement too.
Because of their garden apartments, that's one of the, there is no parking lot
Okay.
behind.
Okay, so we're talking 97 feet then.
97 feet is the closest thing.
Okay.
Yep.
And if I understand correctly, what you said is the planning board could address that. That's their duty to, or their job to.
They have to address it. We
Right.
can't.
Right.
But they look at it, and if they basically say, you know, that, oh, if we impose the full 100 feet, it's going to be too much of an impact on the property, we can lower it to 97. We can lower, again, they can lower it as much as in half.
Can they raise it too? Can they change it? Can they ask for more?
They can ask for more, they can't legally enforce more.
So what?
Like when we did ask at Delphi, would they go bigger? They did.
They said yes.
We,
right.
Well,
I would think they would want to work with the neighbors. They would happy neighbors.
Right. Well, and again, a lot of it depends on how big the property being developed is. Delphi property has lots of room to move that building
Right.
around.
Right.
This one does not have as much room to move the things around. I do think they could squeeze out a little bit more room in that eastern boundary if they would swap building 7 with the clubhouse. The problem is their way their bank thing is drafted right now, they can't. So that's why I offered any assistance to the developer if I could write something to the bank. Banks can be pains in that regard.
Oh, absolutely.
But would you want a clubhouse closer?
No, it's not. So basically the clubhouse wouldn't be closer to these properties. It would swap one of the buildings, but the clubhouse is much smaller than a 10-unit building. And so what that would allow you to do is the building 6, which is in the northeast corner, could slide left. And then all these other buildings could actually slide a little bit north. Because again, there's less space occupied by that. So it could help if the bank will allow them to do it. But anyway, like I said, with regards to this particular, I did have some initial misgivings until I'm glad I went and read the code, because when I read that code, it reminded me how we implemented this, which again, takes that balance into account of the developer and the neighbors. So if people still are comfortable and you want to look at additional stuff between now and next meeting, we can table it. But
I think Millie has a question. Well, I should say Councilperson Safranek. And then I have a question too, but go ahead.
Yeah, so what we are looking to actually do here is to change the designation so that historic homes will be in the same designated category as places like schools.
correct.
Okay.
So there's, if you look at the,
We're not actually voting on the buffering that's already
no,
in place. We're just changing the designation.
right. So today, we're not changing any numbers. Today, the categories are residential, multi-dwelling, industrial, commercial, agricultural, Parker School, and mixed use. And what we're saying is that right now it would apply if I'm, building multi-dwelling next to a house, it's multi-dwelling versus residential. We're saying to add into the Parker School column, historic properties. Right. So now I would look at the table, I'd say, okay, I'm building a multiple dwelling next to a Parker School, or in this case, a historic property. So it would go, well, again, for multi-dwelling, it would stay 100. For industrial, it would increase from 100 to 150. For commercial, it would increase from 100 to 150. For agriculture, it's not applicable. Interestingly enough, New York State ag and market laws are very clear. All buffering must be done on the non-agricultural parcel. A Parker School would be not applicable. It's the same use. And then a mixed use would increase from 100 to 150. So like I said, in basically the three heaviest uses, the buffering would increase from 100 to 150, and the other uses, they would stay the same.
Okay.
So I guess my question would be, based on the code at 295.6, is that from the property line or the farthest part of the property itself?
Under the code, it's the property line.
So for parcel E, where was that measured from, that 97 feet? From the building?
That was the property line. If you look at the map, there's this line drawn that is the 100-foot mark.
97?
Well, it's drawn at 100 feet, but if you look, there's one little corner that peeks over the edge by about 3 feet.
Okay, that was my question.
Yep. So that's the way you do it, is you literally, it's a buffer around that property. And then they can't have any pavement or buildings over that line.
And that's what I thought. I just wanted to get clarification on it.
Yeah.
Because he was talking about the end of the building when he was explaining that just was. So.
Yeah, there's other setback rules that work off different things. So, but yeah, the distance from their home to the building was immaterial with respect to the buffering.
Okay.
So I don't, and forgive me, so I guess I'm looking just for you to let me know, I don't see a negative to this. So
I don't either.
In tabling it or whatever, I guess I just want to understand, because I know with talking to the Historical Society too, they're, this. So I guess I don't see a negative to this. So I'm just looking, am I missing something that there's a negative to this?
There was some confusion on what we were talking about.
There was, and again, I apologize, it was on my part.
Right, if it was commercial property, if it was, industrial property versus multi or residential.
The problem is because when we first looked at this, in my head, we were working with the industrial property. I had all the industrial numbers in my head. And when I looked at this development, I said, oh my God, that's going to create some hardship. And when I then opened the table to answer that question, I realized we'd covered that already.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't see a negative.
So I don't see a negative either.
But would we want to have it bigger for multi-family?
I don't think you do, because again, typically they're not as big a, typically as big a parcel that they're building on.
Okay. I'm good.
So,
Good. I think
so
it's a great resolution.
so
you good, Stafford?
Well, we'd have to, he has a motion on the table right now to table, so we will have to call a vote on that. So if you want a table, you would say aye. If you don't want a table, if you want to vote on it.
Did we get a second on the motion?
Oh, that's a good question. Did
On the
anyone
first
second?
motion, on what motion? On
my
to
motion.
table.
On the motion to table.
No, we did not.
Hold on just a moment.
I don't think we did.
Mr. Stafford, you still wish to go forward with the
That's what I was
motion?
thinking.
I can withdraw it because I think
Okay,
I'll withdraw the motion.
so the motion to table was withdrawn after discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion on the adoption of the local law itself? Anything online? Then hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford.
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Fellow board members and Supervisor Schultz, I have
Actually,
resolution.
before you read this one into the record, I want to ask the question. Do people want to vote on these now, or do we want to table them?
I was gonna make a motion to table.
Yeah, I would prefer to table.
So if we have enough people then let's just, we'll put them in the next meeting.
Right.
Great.
They'll still be
Riverton
1,
parcel
12, and 13.
12 and 13.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, again, most of the questions I see that are left really are planning board decisions, but I'm okay with tabling it because again, there was some significant additional discussion and I don't have a problem with ruminating on it for 2 weeks. So.
It's been out there for 50 years that they could have built it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so Mr. Supervisor, I'll make a motion to table.
No,
we don't
no,
even have-
no,
don't-
we're
no.
not even going to read them into the record.
Nothing.
No,
Okay.
We're just going to
Hold on.
end the resolutions here. Okay?
It's 11, 12, there's one more, no more, 13.
12 and 13, we're not going to
Done.
move on tonight.
We're not going to move on tonight. We're
All
going
right.
to save those for a future meeting. That's why they were put last on the agenda. We thought there was a good chance that was going to be the case. It makes our clerks' lives easier not to have spurious resolutions out there. That finishes it. Any additional discussion items from the board or from the public? We'll get to reports in a moment. Anything online? Reports?
If you give me 1 minute, I turn this off.
No, that's no problem. I will mention that tomorrow night is the Martin Luther King celebration, emceed by our good friend, Councilman Robert Barley.
It's virtual this year, it's not a big job.
It is virtual. It's already been recorded.
Oh, it's already done.
Yep, it will be, the stream is out there. If you go to henrietta.org/MLK, you'll find the YouTube link on there. It will premiere at 7 p.m. tomorrow. So.
Very nice. And shall we ask for your autograph?
I'll give it to you after the meeting, Lisa.
Okay.
Well, you are definitely, because I need it on this.
It's about the only one.
So other reports?
I can, Historical Society, there is an opening on the committee. You have to have your, you have to have your resume and your letter in by February 11th. And library board met last night. Just keep watching the website for any changes to any of the library schedules. So pretty simple.
Anything else?
I have nothing to report.
Okay, the rec center will host a Red Cross blood drive on Saturday, January 30th, 9 to 2. All donations being tested for COVID antibodies. Blood donations that test positive for COVID antibodies could provide plasma for critically coronavirus patients. To sign up, visit redcrossblood.org. Registration for Food Link for our food drive on January 21st is now open. That food drive is going to be 10 to 12. Last I knew, they were still looking for some volunteers. I'm not sure if they still are or not.
You can, again, send something to, if you're interested in volunteering, you can contact me at supervisor@henrietta.org. Or you can contact the recreation department.
Okay, there's some new programs that with registration. Now, adult line dancing and indoor flag football, into the theater and youth pitching clinics. What?
Well, Rob just gave me a look at adult line dancing. So.
No, she looked at me first and I caught it.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if
I will not be doing adult line.
I didn't know if
I
I did it when I was much younger, but.
I have no rhythm whatsoever.
The new community mural at the rec center is completed. The completed project will be posted on Downs Facebook tomorrow. And Steve already mentioned the Martin Luther King celebration, in the Recreation Center continues to expand the hours. They're now open from 9 p.m. They are now open until 9 p.m. on the weekdays.
I would just reiterate on something Mr. Stafford said about the Red Cross. You know, their donations are really down. And there's a lot of people sick in the hospital. I know my mother was in, she got a couple of pints. So it's very important for us to keep donating blood at this time during this pandemic. There's something else you said that
the food link?
No, it wasn't the food link.
About the plasma?
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, if you're O negative, they need you to get up on the table and give up about 30 minutes and get about 3 pints out of you. That's what I do when I go. So your donations are really needed on a serious note. I'm done.
Just that you already signed up for the line dancing, right?
The line dancing is very intriguing because it's a very sad time now, and that would make us happy. We'll dance.
For those of you who can dance.
I would stand next to the people that can't, just because.
Oh, I know what it was. The Martin Luther King program this year, they're going to present their first scholarship of $500, and it's going to a very worthy recipient. So tune in.
I just noticed that the construction, the walls have started to go up on the senior center's new 3-season room. Our DPW crews are doing that. That'll be a nice addition for the senior center.
That's great.
We had our first meeting for the new sewer garage and the pole barn that will be used for the facilities and grounds. We're going to get rid of the old garage from the old DPW that's starting to come down on its own.
Okay.
We decided that that made the most sense for the location for the sewer building due to the turning radiuses of the Vector trucks, and as well as allowing the highway vehicles to attach their snow plows. So
that's great planning.
Yep. Anything else? Hearing nothing else, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Hearing no objections, meeting adjourned.